I was the weakest one in the room, so how did I become the only one strong enough to hold everything together? For as long as I could remember, I was the delicate one, the sensitive soul, the sibling who would surely crumble under pressure. I was the weakest one in the room, constantly shielded, constantly underestimated. I'm Adrian, 38. My family was a constellation of powerful personalities. My father, Robert, 65, was a charismatic, booming force in local politics, used to commanding attention. My mother, Eleanor, 63, was the elegant, unflappable matriarch, the queen of social grace and quiet influence. My older brother, Michael, 42, was the golden boy, a brilliant corporate lawyer, sharp-witted and confident. My younger sister, Chloe, 36, was the fiery, rebellious artist, fiercely independent and unapologetically outspoken. And then there was me. I was the quiet observer, the introspective one, prone to deep feelings and easily overwhelmed. I cried easily, felt things intensely, and often retreated into books or my own thoughts. From an early age, I was branded, sensitive, and fragile. They didn't mean it maliciously. My mother would gently guide me away from conflicts, my father would avoid discussing difficult topics in front of me, and my siblings would often make decisions for me, assuming I couldn't handle the emotional weight. They saw my quiet nature not as strength, but as a fundamental vulnerability. My childhood was a series of small, well-meaning shields. They protected me from harsh truths, from messy emotions, from the complexities of life. While they argued fiercely, laughed boisterously, and navigated the rough and tumble of their ambitious lives, I was often relegated to the periphery, a delicate vase they worried about breaking. The pervasive life lesson I absorbed was chilling. My capacity for feeling was a weakness, and true strength lay in stoicism, assertiveness, and an almost ruthless ability to navigate the world without emotional ripples. I grew up believing I was fundamentally flawed, a burden to their robust existence. As an adult, I gravitated towards roles that reinforced this perception. I became a librarian, a job that suited my quiet, organized nature and allowed me to immerse myself in stories that weren't my own. I never pursued grand ambitions. I lived a calm, measured life, far from the intense pressures my family thrived on. They saw my choice as further proof of my fragility. Adrian just needs his quiet, my mother would say with a soft smile, a statement that subtly dismissed any deeper aspirations I might have had. My father would try to draw me into political conversations, quickly giving up when I didn't offer strong opinions. Michael and Chloe barely registered my professional life, often changing the subject when it came up, eager to discuss their own dynamic careers. I accepted my role. I was the gentle background hum in their vibrant symphony. I rarely asserted myself, always deferred to their stronger opinions, and absorbed their criticisms like soft rain, internalizing the belief that I simply wasn't built for the intensity of real life. My relationships were shallow, my confidence low. I avoided conflict at all costs, afraid of unleashing the torrent of emotions I was taught was a liability. I was invisible, and I believed it was for my own protection. What would you do if the people closest to you constantly underestimated your emotional capacity? Would you fight to prove them wrong, or would you retreat into the safe, quiet corner they assigned you? The first crack in their impenetrable facade appeared when my father, Robert, lost his bid for a crucial state-level political office. It wasn't just a professional defeat, it was a public humiliation, a shattering of his carefully constructed image. The man who had always been a rock began to crumble. He retreated, grew irritable, and started drinking heavily. My mother, Eleanor, who had always derived her strength from his public persona, became utterly lost. Her elegant composure dissolved into quiet despair. Then, the financial dominoes started to fall. My father's investments, tied to his political ventures, proved unsound. My parents' seemingly secure fortune began to dwindle rapidly. Michael, the brilliant corporate lawyer, was consumed by his own high-pressure career, barely able to keep his head above water. His firm was undergoing a merger, and he was fighting for his position. He saw his parents' troubles as an unwelcome distraction, a drain on his limited emotional reserves. He offered legal advice, but no real support. Chloe, the fiery artist, responded with anger. She railed against their materialism and shallow ambition, blaming their lifestyle for their downfall. She moved further away, both physically and emotionally, unable to cope with the raw vulnerability of her parents. She felt betrayed by their weakness. And in the midst of this chaos, I, the weakest one, was still there. Quietly observing, quietly absorbing. I didn't have booming charisma like my father, or sharp legal arguments like Michael, or fiery independence like Chloe. All I had was my sensitivity, the very quality they had always deemed a weakness. But in the storm, my sensitivity became my greatest strength. While they were all reacting with anger, denial, or self-preservation, I was simply feeling. I felt my father's humiliation, my mother's despair, Michael's stress, and Chloe's rage. And because I felt it all, I could see it clearly. I started by doing small things. I cooked simple, comforting meals when my mother forgot to eat. I organized their bills, creating spreadsheets and meticulously tracking their dwindling finances, a task none of my stronger siblings had the emotional bandwidth for. I listened to my father's bitter rants without judgment, letting him vent his pain into the space I created. When Michael became overwhelmed trying to manage their legal issues, I didn't offer advice. I offered to handle the research, to sift through documents, to be his calm, methodical assistant, taking the administrative load off his plate. When Chloe lashed out, I didn't argue back. I acknowledged her pain, creating a bridge for her anger, making her feel heard instead of judged. I became the invisible anchor. I wasn't making grand pronouncements or heroic saves. I was simply holding space, organizing chaos, and providing quiet, consistent emotional support. The ultimate life lesson that emerged was profound. True strength isn't the absence of feeling, it's the ability to feel deeply, to empathize, and to remain present and stable in the face of overwhelming emotional turbulence. My sensitivity, once my greatest shame, was now my family's lifeline. It wasn't a sudden recognition from them. It was gradual, almost imperceptible. My mother, Eleanor, started leaning on me. She'd sit with me in silence, sometimes just holding my hand, her usual composure replaced by raw vulnerability. She saw my quiet strength, the one she had unwittingly suppressed for years. She'd say, "I don't know what I'd do without you, Adrian." It wasn't a praise of my brilliance, it was a recognition of my unwavering presence. My father, Robert, would sometimes catch my eye across the room, a flicker of something new there, not pity, not dismissal, but a dawning understanding. He started asking my opinion on practical matters, truly listening. Michael, after a particularly grueling day, once told me, "You're the only one who doesn't make me feel worse, Adrian. You just deal with it." It wasn't a compliment in his usual terms, but it was a recognition of my unique ability to handle the emotional undertow. Chloe still had her fiery moments, but she started confiding in me, sharing her fears and her vulnerability, knowing I wouldn't judge her for it. None of them apologized for underestimating me. None of them explicitly said, "You were right, and we were wrong." But their actions, their reliance, their quiet deference spoke volumes. I was no longer the fragile one. I was the center of gravity, the emotional pivot around which their broken world slowly began to reorient itself. If the people who always saw you as weak finally leaned on you for strength, would you feel bitter satisfaction, or a deeper, more complicated sense of fulfillment? Holding everything together was incredibly draining. There were nights I cried alone, overwhelmed by the weight of their pain. But there was also a profound sense of purpose I had never known. For the first time, my existence wasn't a burden, it was a necessity. I helped my parents downsize, navigate their new financial reality, and find a sense of peace in their retirement. I helped Michael find a better work-life balance and reconnect with his family. I helped Chloe channel her passion into community art projects, giving her a positive outlet. I didn't fix them, I simply provided the stable ground on which they could begin to rebuild themselves. The ultimate lesson of this harrowing period wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. It was about discovering that the weakness they saw in me, my sensitivity, my empathy, my quiet strength, was, in fact, the most potent power I possessed. I was the quiet observer, but I had seen the true cost of their strength, the emotional repression, the inability to adapt, the fragility beneath the bravado. My journey taught me that strength isn't about how much you can lift, it's about how much you can feel, and still stand. I emerged from that period not as the delicate Adrian, but as a man who understood his own profound resilience. I am still Adrian, 38, still quiet, still sensitive. But now, I know that my capacity for feeling is not a vulnerability, it is the source of my unbreakable strength. I want to know what you think. If you were always seen as the weakest one, but ultimately became the pillar of your family, would you ever truly forgive them for underestimating you, or would the experience permanently reshape your relationship? Let me know your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.